Hey, what's up? I'm Mac, and I'm continuing my series on mountaineering equipment and mountaineering gear in regards to help assemble those of you that might be interested in learning more about creating a mountaineering kit and also some gear tips and some facts if you have a desire to get into mountaineering. As a reminder, I'm doing a lot of this in preparation for my upcoming Aconcagua expedition with the organization called Veterans Adventure Group. They'll be doing in this upcoming January. Veterans Adventure Group is still ongoing with their fundraising campaign. So if you can follow them on Instagram, you can make a contribution, as well as go to their website, veteransadventuregroup.com, and search donate to make a donation to their page. Today I'm going to be talking about crampons, mostly because I think there's a lot of good things to say in regards and a lot of good points to be made about crampons. And a lot of my focus is talking to people about ways to reduce cost and some of the pros and cons, as well as some of the trade-offs that you might experience with doing something like that. So I have both of my primary boots here, which is my La Sportiva Spantics, as well as my La Sportiva Nepals. I haven't tied them. And I have the two different sets of crampons, which are basically I have two sets of strap-on crampons right now. I actually got these from Whitaker Mountaineering. They were doing their sort of cachet sale, or maybe their gear locker sale. And so I bought two of these. The reason I bought two of these is because, again, gearing up for an expedition to Denali, hopefully in 2027, I plan to use my Spantics with an overboot. And I just find that, just getting some beta from a lot of different people that have been to Denali, utilize overboots, and most people, the primary overboot that is used is the 40 below Purple Haze overboot. It's just the most mass produced, and it's a great product from what I hear. They do say that you can use a crampon that is sort of a more locking crampon, maybe a semi-automatic crampon, but I've had someone that I respect a great deal that went to Denali that actually got frostbite because he just wasn't confident with the secure and snugness of his crampons that were sort of a semi-automatic, meaning it had a lock-in on the back heel and then it had the sort of circle U sort of strap-on part in the front. So as a result, he opted to not wear an overboot when he went for the summit, and he did summit, but he got, frostbite on his foot. And that's something that, among all of the things that can happen with mountaineering, I think frostbite or cold weather injuries is something that's really difficult to assess, because they really are, they can be preventable if you make really wise choices. And sometimes you have to make close calls, tight calls, or even suffer a little bit, and sort of, have cold feet. But there's a difference in having cold feet and getting frostbite. So I just opted this time to go with strap-on crampons. I plan on bringing these strap-on crampons to Aconcagua. The primary purpose is so I can get really used to utilizing them, so that when I get to Denali, it's not something that is sort of a new sort of experience for me. And then just implementing an overboot still makes them gives me the ability to put them on securely and snugly. There's still going to be differences with an overboot in terms of getting this down, but strap-on crampons, the key is mostly ratcheting it down with your own brute force and then securing it very nicely. That's something that I think is, something that just takes a little bit of practice, and ultimately is sort of on you to get proficient in the skill set. There are different types of crampons, and I just like to talk about this a little bit, in that there are strap-on crampons, and then there's automatic crampons, which means they have like a metal, sort of locking and then a clamp part in the back. And then there's semi-automatic crampons, where you'll have like the U front here, where it's not a metal bar over the lip of the shoe, of the boot, and then it'll have the actually locking part. I've used all three different types of crampons as of right now, and I think this is where it goes into the difference of like buying really high-end or going a little bit cheaply. My first set of crampons were this like old school fully automatic crampons that even had like a little thing that went over the front, so it kind of got the best of two worlds, but I didn't think they were very streamlined. So then what I ended up doing is I made like a Frankenstein version where I took a semi-automatic front, removed the automatic front of my crampons, and then added that. They weren't compatible in terms of the same brand, And they did work fine for a while, but on Rainier, they started, like one, particularly on the right one, started to come off, and then I would have to fix it. And I had to fix it twice over the course of that whole weekend or that whole climb. Now, it wasn't something that I could manage, and luckily I had a lot of practice with putting the crampons together, utilizing them, how to, use the technique to get them back in place. And they didn't come off in a precarious position. But, that is a risk. They can fall off. And they could fall off in a really bad no fall zone. And that's something that, you should be mindful, because I think the one thing that we want out of crampons is that they don't fall off and they do the job that they're intended to, meaning sticking in the snow, giving you secure front pointing. So that's why I'm just, kind of leaning into doing the strap-on crampon, because if I cinch it down, I'm going to be very confident in them staying on over my brute force of my legs, just sort of pounding them into the snow or the rock or the ground. I will also say that when you buy super high-end products on this point, whereas I think you can get away with a lot of cheaper alternatives for a lot of other pieces of equipment, but crampons particularly, if you buy top of the line gear, they're going to perform at a high level. So there was a guy, Derek, was wearing Scarpa boots, and he had, I think, the Petzl crampons, but I'm not sure the exact brands, but they fit like so mechanically perfectly, like a glove. Just as two fully automatic crampons, and they just fit seamlessly within the boot, and they just snapped on, and they even came with a nice thing for the the actual strap, very seamlessly, and even had a thing where it tucked in very nicely. So that's something where if you're like, hey, do I really want to start pretty poorly or go the cheapest option, or do I want to, is it going to make financial sense, yes or no, but is it going to have vastly noticeable improvements? I would say crampons are definitely in that category. And then the other thing is, like, I beat crampons up pretty hard. So when you're buying used crampons, they're already sort of worn in and worn out. These are actually, they were listed as like tier 3 or tier 4 from their gearbox, because a lot of their tier 1 equipment was already sold pretty quickly. They're definitely not going to perform at the most optimal level. So that's sort of the drawback. But I think they'll definitely get the job done. I sort of looked at them and evaluated. There's one strap that I have a little bit of concern that it was a little frayed, but I'm going to see if I can either replace the strap or reinforce the strap so it's not a big problem. And again, we're not ice climbing major walls, but, if you're on a major expedition like Denali, you really can't afford to not have crampons. So that's something that would be a concern. I do think that with some straps, other straps, I could make these work if I had to have an emergency and get down. So that's where something, especially with some of my ski straps that I bring, these like elastic rubbery ski straps that I use for other things, with the strap-on crampons, I do have a couple of alternatives. It's not going to be perfect, but in a situation where I may have to get down in an emergency, I do have some sort of backup plans that could get me through that. Again, I think there's not necessarily a wrong option, but this is the first time that I would probably, if someone wasn't sure, I would tell them, instead of buying cheaper or going for the alternative lower priced options, I would say that you're probably going to save yourself a lot of headache by going for the higher end, newer version, just because the technology has improved so dramatically. You do see crampons on eBay or other resale sites for pretty affordable prices. I'd say under $100, but you're still looking at a high cost regardless. And for an extra $100, you're going to get a product that's going to work a lot better. Yeah, that's all I would say. The biggest thing is, like, if you're going to need an overboot. But if you want to sort of jump into that higher price range of let's say you want to go to Denali and you're going to get a triple boot, and then you get a fully automatic crampon, you have a very streamlined, simple system. And that's just something that you have to be cognizant of. Whereas, for someone like me who's trying to, use a cheaper boot that's a double boot with an overboot, the strap-on crampon just made the most logical sense to me. We're actually been talking about Aconcagua, and some people are going to be wearing their single La Sportiva Nepals. I'm still sort of emotionally processing that, because everything I know about Aconcagua, it can be a very cold summit. Particularly, it's known for being a very windy summit. And so these things, I have worn these Nepals with a fully automatic crampon on Mount Washington, which I would imagine is fairly similar in the conditions. The only difference is it doesn't take 3 weeks to get to the summit of Mount Washington. You know, that's the tallest peak in New Hampshire. It's 6,288 feet. So certainly a vastly different height than the almost 23,000 that Aconcagua has. But you know, Mount Washington is known for having like really brutal weather, and I've climbed it always in the winter and usually the worst conditions I can get. And so that results in me sometimes not summiting it, you know, but my toes have almost never been cold on Mount Washington. And I specifically was thinking that, you know, if I implement a double boot for Aconcagua, then I'll be safe and I don't need an overboot. So again, it's just something that I'm sort of weighing in both my options. At least I have a system that I can pick from that's going to adequately do the job and keep my feet secure, and have a crampon system that I can implement. So hope that's very helpful. Again, I wish I had more to say, and I wish I had more options regarding what a crampon does and is, but it's essentially pretty straightforward in that it's something you put on your feet to secure you in the snow. I will also say that depending on what boot you have, is probably going to depend on what's the best crampon. So if you are going a more higher level or higher rate in terms of a crampon, then I would say that you might want to look at different reviews about what's the best crampon, because from what I've been told, not all crampons work with all different types of boots. And so there are some that just match beautifully. Again, whatever that system was from the Scarpa boot that I saw my buddy Derek wearing with I think it was the Petzl, but I could be wrong on which crampon system he had, but they just fit like a glove. And I was pretty impressed with that system. It's something that, you know, if I ever upgrade to Scarpa boots, that's probably the crampon that I would buy, because it definitely makes it worth it. And it you know, wasn't that much effort. Even the fully automatic systems, even with these having a pretty good ridge line, I remember it's like a battle, like, click, and and you know, it's secure when I had the automatics. But you know, when you wear them out and the crampons get locked out, they can pop out, or if they're not a perfectly seamless fit, they can pop right off. And that's why you have different things like the loops to secure them to the boot so that there is sort of a safety net. The one tip I will give today about crampons, regardless of what crampon you use, and I would imagine the nicer ones have probably have a system in place to secure, is you're gonna have like a dangly strap. When I first started mountaineering, I would try and tuck this in, and I just found it always came out. And it was such an annoyance to constantly be tucking it down, but you're also trying to walk, and you're trying to climb, you're trying to do all something that would pop out. And sometimes after a while, you just stop caring, then you're stepping on it, and you're like, ugh. And then some people like to tuck it down. What I found is a really good trick, and I just don't have it on this, is I use a hair tie, like one of those black little circle things that you'd always see on the floors of, you know, girls' apartments. And I will put it somewhere on this boot, about on this part of the strap, so that, and I put it in 3 separate loops, and so that when I finally get to this part, I cinch the boot down, I can tuck it on 3 separate times, and then cinch it down, almost like a daisy chain on that regard. If you remember on like military vehicles, when we would be tarping vehicles up, you can kind of cinch it away and just put it away. And I found that I did it on Rainier. It worked very effectively for my last set of crampons, and it wasn't really a problem. It's also very easily to pull that out and get it out. So again, hope this is very helpful. I wish I had more to say on this, but you know, crampons are kind of personal, but I think there's a lot of different options out there for you to pick the best system for you. Peace.